is Yahweh directly coded over our DNA. Did you know that God has written his name on our hearts so deeply that it is coded over our very DNA? Isaiah focuses on the word zerah, meaning seed. It literally in Hebrew means sperm or your genetic offspring is what the term means. And in Isaiah 43 verses 5 and 7, we find a very poignant prophecy. Isaiah says, "Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your seed." Here the word is zerah, physical offsprings from one generation to another. "I will bring your seed from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not keep back. I will bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone that is called by my name." This indicates a very specific name. It is not generic. It is a specific name by which we are called. "I have created him for my glory. I have formed him. Yes, I have made him." Now here's Jeremiah 23. We're going to begin in verse 3. "And I will gather the remnant of my flock from all countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them again into their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase." Skip down to verse 7. "Therefore the days come, says Yahweh, that I will no more say, Yahweh lives, who brought forth the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But Yahweh lives, who brought forth the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country and from all the countries where I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land." Did you know that God has written his name, his character, and his covenant on the very hearts of Israel's genetic seed? Now, this may sound a little strange, so stick with me, because the coding has been replicated so many times, and it overlays the sequence of our DNA so strongly that it influences our modern day identity. It's like a program that think of a program within your iPhone that is an app. So that app functions and it works according to a particular way. It doesn't override the coding that creates your iPhone and makes your iPhone the iPhone. You can still receive calls. You can still have other function. It still works like a mini computer. But that specific app can run things on your phone. And that is kind of what this genetic DNA code that we have inherited from our ancestors. I mean, this coding is created by Yahweh and it overlays. And we're going to discuss this process because I'd like to share some scientific discoveries in the field of genetics that are fascinating regarding how we inherit the past. So epigenetics studies genetics and genes that are passed on from one generation to another. That's the trans part. Then, of course, the genetics is the study of genes and their influence on the human host. So think of DNA as a garden full of plants and seeds. In other words, genes that tell your body, your heart, and your mind how to work. Epigenetics is like pollen or chemicals in the water that feeds and highlights one part of the plant, allowing certain parts to turn on or off, but without changing the plant itself. For instance, a rose is still a rose, even if you add lime and change the colors of that rose. For DNA, the pollinating or watering of plants and seeds can come from the experiences of the past, like stress, toxins, or diet. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of this just a little bit, because scientists have found some very fascinating evidence from this idea of pollinating, where chemicals are like water or like are factors within water that originates from your ancestors' experiences. These can get passed down through your sperm eggs and affect your health or behavior without rewriting the DNA code itself. For example, in a 2013 study based on mouse experiments, dads were trained to fear a specific smell like cherry blossoms. They passed this fear on to their kids and grandkids who got jumpy around the smell, even though they had never experienced the shocks that were associated with that smell. So in other words, scientists exposed, and this goes back to Pavlov, if you're familiar with the whole Pavlov experiment, but similarly, Pavlov really studied one generation. Here, this goes across generation. And what they discovered is that when they exposed the dads of the male mice, to cherry blossoms, and they had an electric shock with it, that the children, the offspring of these mice, when they were exposed to cherry blossom smell, even though they did not experience the shock, they still had the same reaction to that smell that their dads did. So this happened because the chemical tags on that smell, the detecting gene in the dad's sperm, stuck around for generations. In another 2005 study on rats, it demonstrated that if pregnant moms were exposed to chemicals like fungicides, their great-grandkids who had never touched fungicides ended up with problems like low sperm counts and higher chances of kidney disease because those exposures switched on or off certain genes that stayed flipped across familial lines. So in other words, generations later, that exposure is still influencing the children and the genetics that those children inherit. One study even linked bug spray or plastic chemicals to a unique gene that marks causing obesity in later generations. In worms, these changes lasted an amazing 14 generations, or for the 14 familial lines. Now, if we put this in human terms, this would be lasting 430 years. This is a very long time. So the idea that your ancestors' tough times, their values, their life experiences subtly shape you today is like an invisible family heirloom, where the seeds are planted within the garden of your DNA. Now, this takes us full circle because in his covenant, Yahweh actually reveals the role DNA would play in writing and etching his inheritance upon our hearts and forming the very foundation of our identity through transgenetic coding. Go to Exodus 34, verse 7. It states, Yahweh keeps the mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, but will by no means clear the guilty. He visits the iniquity upon the fathers, upon their children's children, upon the children to the third and fourth generations. Now, this highly controversial text is key to the very covenant that God made with Israel. It's repeated well over 3 and 4 times throughout the written Torah. So Yahweh has revealed what we are only discovering through technology today. The past influences future generations. Past choices, your ancestors' choices, and the consequences of those choices are inherited many generations in the future. Now, we tend to think of this in purely negative terms like iniquity and inheriting iniquity. But the reverse is also true, where the positive terms and the positive things that your ancestor did equally affect your genetics. This is the beauty of genetics and transgenetics especially, because just as iniquity can be passed down from parent to child, so can the righteousness and the blessing also be passed down. And this is what Deuteronomy 7 verse 9 reiterates. Know therefore that Yahweh, your God, he is God, the faithful God, which keeps covenant and mercy with them to 1,000 generations. Now, if we take the average the average age at which a person has children. So for most people, it's going to be somewhere between between 20 and 30 years of age. This means that this covenant extends to 20 to 30,000 years. So this genetic coding, the coding that can be passed through generation after generation and generation for 20 to 30,000 years, that is a very, very strong code. But for most of us, it lies dormant. It's there, but do we see it? Do we know it? And I want to share with you how some of that coding is so important today and what we are seeing across the face of the earth. Because just as these seeds are planted deep within our DNA of what we've inherited, and if you think that today we have passed 2,500 years and that genetic coding, that past of our ancestors is buried and dead and gone and doesn't influence us today, think again, because scripture is full of promises directly to Jacob's genetic seed, directly to the children of Israel scattered in the nations today. And this is where we find the beginning of Yahweh's promises, or not the beginning, but it is a continuation. It is a reiteration in Isaiah 49 verses 15 and 16. Can a woman forget her suckling child? Should she not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yes, they may forget me, but I will not forget you. Behold, I have engraved you on the palm of my hands, and your walls are continually before me. Did you know that Yahweh can see your DNA even when you can't? The palm of one's hand is always visible. It's always in use, and it's always before you, signifying that Yahweh has never lost sight of his people. They are always before him. He can see them. He can hold them in the most intimate and protective way because they are engraved on his very hands. They are very active in his sight. But this equally has etched his covenant onto our very DNA, like an operating code that functions on top of our human DNA. And he knows who we are throughout history, even though we do not. So even though we do not yet today have the technology that allows us to identify or see the seed of Jacob, the lost 10 or lost 12 tribes among the nations, because we are scattered throughout the world today, God still sees us and he can still identify us because it is etched into our very DNA and on the palms of his hands. Now, all that is needed for this process to kind of come full circle, and when we talk about repentance, it's in Hebrew, it's this idea of teshuvah, this returning. It's this idea of a revolution where Israel has this beginning. They've strayed, they've gone completely around the circle, and they've come full circle back to their beginning. And this beginning is so important because it brings us full circle to what was revealed to our ancestors, to an original point of origin. And this is where we find the importance of Yahweh's Spirit. And the fact that his Spirit will take and water and pollinate us today. So I want to delve into this a little bit deeper. So if you will hang with me, I want to get into a few texts that really draw out the importance of this seed and this transgenerational inheritance that we have today. Let's start in Amos 9:9. Where Amos states, I will command, and I will sift the house of Israel among all nations as corn is sifted in the sieve. Yet shall not the least grain fall upon the earth. This least grain really signifies that even if it's small, even if it's a single seed, that it is still important and that genetic coding is still functioning. Skip down to verse 14. And I will bring again the captivity of my people of Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them, and they will plant vineyards and drink the wine of it. And they shall plant gardens and eat the fruit of it. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall never again be pulled out from the land which Yahweh your God has given them. This is an incredible promise that has yet to be fulfilled today. Yes, the first steps of it are very likely being fulfilled with Judah today in the land of Israel. But this speaks nothing to the 10 tribes scattered among the nation. It speaks nothing to Ephraim, and it speaks nothing to even those Jews that are scattered among Ephraim that were taken during the siege, Assyria's siege earlier. So let's also look at Jeremiah 31, because this is really, in many ways, addressed to us today. This is a covenant. This is a promise that we inherit through those ancient promises today. And this is what it says. Sing with gladness, O Jacob, and shout among the nations. Publish, praise you, Yahweh, and say, save the people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coasts of the earth. With them the blind and the lame and the woman with child and her that is pregnant. I will bring them all together, and a great company shall return here. And they shall come with weeping and with supplication, and I will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn son. Hear the word of Yahweh, you nations, and declare in the isles very far away, and say, he that scattered Israel will also gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. Do you realize the incredibleness of this promise and the incredibleness of the fact that time, that generations cannot separate us from this ancient promise? So I'm going to propose something to you today, and I'm going to ask you to ask yourself some very deep questions. Number one, does the land of Israel call to you? Does biblical history of Israel burn within your soul? Have you fallen in love with God, with the 10 Commandments, with the idea that God's way of life actually works? Do you long for truth? Does your soul seek for justice? If so, you are very likely the offspring of ancient Israel. And that genetic coding that occurred, that was established by our forefathers, is functioning and overriding our DNA. It sits there on top, and it calls us today. Now, all it's missing for this final restoration, because right now we're small. Some of us are awakening here. Some of us are awakening there, but it hasn't really come to where it is this worldwide movement that is so populous, that is so loud, where it is proclaimed from sea to shining sea, from land across continents. The only reason that we do not yet see that today is that we are missing one key component. And it is that component that will awaken our history, that will awaken that covenant that is etched into our very hearts and soul very soon in our future. So join me next time, because we're going to get into this even deeper. We're going to dig deeper, because these promises are yet to be fulfilled. These promises, righteousness does not yet ring across the earth. The promises of nations turning their swords into plowshares has not yet been fulfilled. But you know what? we could be on the verge of this long forgotten day, a day that we are today remembering, a past that we are today awakening and remembering, and a promise of a redemption that we can see in our days. From my home to yours, shalom.